Good day everyone, so hope you're doing really well. I've got a question for you. Are you happy with the advice that you were given by some of your favorite Genshin Impact content creators? Now, I want to speak in today's video from the perspective of someone that followed my KokomiClan's advice and whether you would still be F2P okay enough to beat the current content. And that's what we'll talk a bit about. Now, if you look at some of the background footage, you might be like, yeah, but oof, that's an 8 out of 9 stars on floor 12, so pretty bad advice. KokomiClan kind of fell off. And no, not really. I'll show you how to get, obviously, the full 9 out of 9 stars, but I want to take this as an opportunity to say that if you followed my channel and the characters that I love promoting and that I love playing with, then you are still gonna be okay. And I'm gonna demonstrate this using my second account. So this is my other account. This is not a C6 account. I've predominantly got 5-star characters at C0 and 1 or 2 5-star weapons, and occasionally like Oshena back to back like Constellation C1. There's actually video evidence of it, but as you can see in the background, those are all the 5-star characters I have, barring some standard characters that I didn't level up because of resource management. And that's all that I have for a 4-year-old account that's done all the events, that's done all the dailies, that's gotten all the bonuses from the shop, etc, etc. So hopefully it'll make sense that if you've been playing for 4 years, your account could reasonably look like this. There's always going to be RNG involved, and that's why I've tried to temper down some of the builds, and perhaps, like for instance with Shenna, I'm using Favonius instead of using her signature weapon. All of these things definitely impact the final output, but just to show you that accounting a bit in a very broad way for RNG, you're still going to be okay. By the way, I'm not even playing with the tenacity set on Kokomi. I'm not using an anime unit to shred resistance. All I want you to get from today's video is that I'm someone that's got a certain bias when it comes to my playstyles and the characters that I typically like, and that with those characters and playstyles, you are still okay enough. This is not an optimal speedrun, it's not meant to be a speedrun, it's not meant to be the fastest way to go through the abyss. Yes, there are 4-star characters and other teams that'll give you faster clearing times. We have all of those things caveated, so let's get into the bulk of today's video. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the fact that people typically, especially content creators, have the game kind of backwards. So when you pull for a character, you're supposed to be pulling for a character whose story that you love and that you're going to spend quite a bit of time with in the overworld, which is the bulk of the Genshin Impact gameplay. It is very backwards to say I'm only going to pull for a character to try and beat the end game content, because, like it or not, Genshin was never designed with the end game in mind. The idea has always been, you like character X, you build up character X, and then the Spiral Abyss is the place where you go and test the progression of your account, of how far you've gotten with your character against a set of enemies that are increasingly more and more difficult. And once you see the world in that perspective, you can then start saying, aha, what I'm looking for from Genshin content creators are different ways to use a character with an existing roster of characters. What are some of the advantages to using the character? What are some of the playstyles associated with the character? And once you dig into that and you truly understand that, then it's a lot easier for you to say, yeah, this is now the basis from which I can decide whether the advice was good or not. So for example, I'm someone that, if you've noticed here in the background, loves using elemental skills in quick swap teams. That is my playstyle. I don't like the hyper carry playstyle where you just buff one character really crazy and do a lot of damage. I like the constant action, the quick swapping, the managing your abilities to get to an outcome. And those are the types of characters that I've promoted. So you might say, well, you followed my advice, but because your playstyle is different, that advice wasn't appropriate. But then we would have to be honest with each other and ask ourselves, was it because the characters were underperforming? Was it because you expected something different than what was presented, etc.? We always have to talk about the nuance. I think a lot of the times in the past, people would have said to me, "Oh, you're the Kokomi salesman," and other people would be the Xiangling salesman, like Tenten and so on. But if you reduce content creators just to that kind of, this person just out there to sell you something, then you really lose out on the nuance. So if you watched my channel, you'd ask yourself, well, how far could I have gotten with a character like Kokomi throughout these past 4 years, assuming you've always been around? I can confidently tell you that as of the current moment in Genshin Impact, if you are a new player right now, then picking up a character like Kokomi might not be the best thing for your account. It will probably be easier to pick up someone like Farina. But 2-3 years ago, picking up Kokomi was absolutely one of the best moves. By the way, here in the background is how I got my 9 stars on this account. I've used Beidou and Fischl very often with Kokomi in physical Kokomi teams. At the time it was incredibly fun, and I'm just using the budget Geoshield Breaker Overload team here. Not the best gameplay because I think I had 1 day left to beat this Abyss on this account. I completely forgot about it, but it is what it is, so you'll have to forgive me. Okay, so getting back to where we were earlier, yes, picking up a character like Kokomi is absolutely worth it if you consider the advice as it was appropriate at the time. So currently in Genshin Impact, the move from the developers has been to put characters in Abyss buff blessings that really heavily favor the current characters that you could be pulling for. But way back when Kokomi came out, you had options, for instance, like Taser, Sukokomon, Freeze, Kokomi physical clam set here with Fischl and Beidou. You could do so many cool things with the character and still beat all of the content, including the Spiral Abyss content, very convincingly. And up until the point when Nilo and Nehida and so on came, Kokomi just got more and more teams. So if you look at Kokomi, for instance, as a character, yeah, you can say that for a gacha character lasting you more than 2.5 years, very successfully, that you could argue was, if someone gave you the advice pull on Kokomi, then that must be good advice. I think that's the whole point of the channel. Now, whether you should still be pulling for Kokomi is a different story, just as much as it now is an open question of whether you should still be pulling for Kazuha. Should you actually be building characters like Xiangling with characters like Mavuika coming up? So the nature of the game, the nature of the content that's being presented, all of this changes over time. And once again, what you always need to consider is that the overworld of Genshin Impact, the character personalities and all of these things definitely take precedence, unless you are someone that is dedicated to speedrunning, in which case you don't even need my advice, because you should know enough to be able to do your own thing. But for everyone else, if we look back here on the channel, promoting Yae Miko was not a bad thing. She got really good with the aggravate teams, and using Yae has been very, very solid. In a similar vein, I was one of the few people right at the beginning of Yelan's launch to say she is better than Xingqiu. She is going to be very, very powerful, and that has played out exceptionally well. I think one of my strongest C6 units still to today is Yelan, perhaps barring Sichuan, which can be very, very competitive in some other scenarios as well. And the list just goes on. Kuki Shinobu was a character that I said before Dendro came out is your reaction-based support. It's the same with Nehida, it's the same with Nilo, and so on. And I'm very happy with what we've done on the channel, because people that I've pulled for similar characters, following a similar playstyle and liking some of these characters, can rest assured that putting in some time and effort, building your characters properly, you can beat all of the content very, very convincingly, even though you might not beat all of the content all of the time with all of the characters mentioned. In fact, there are plenty of combat scenarios where you would not use Xiangling or Bennett or Xingqiu or Kazuha or Zhonglin, and there are other characters that will just do it more consistently and better. And that's just the case that we can see here as well. In any case, I want to start wrapping up this video and just challenge you watching this to think of all of the times when you looked at, let's say, Theorycrafter giving you some leaks on upcoming characters and how accurate those takes were, or what some people on Twitter or Twitch or wherever might have said about certain characters. Were you given good advice? What type of advice do you prioritize? If you look back on my channel, was there ever a point where you followed the advice and thought, yeah, you know, this was the worst mistake I could ever make? These are things I would be very interested, because I know that Genshin Impact is a game that everyone plays differently. Everyone has different priorities, and more recently one of my favorite priorities has been to choose characters that are good for exploration purposes. For instance, someone like Shilonen is very comfy. I do use her quite a lot in the overworld. So in that vein, I want to know exactly what the pain points are, and I'm not saying that throughout the years we've gotten everything 100% right. Certainly there have been one or two questionable takes, and perhaps based off of a faulty understanding of some of the TC and some of the theory crafting, but that's just the way life goes. I mean, you won't get everything right, especially in a dynamic video game like Genshin Impact, which very often can change on the developer's whim. So we have to be honest about that. We have to be honest about all the situations in which a character has worked. We have to be honest about all the times people have spent retrying the Abyss floors over and over just to get one very good run, and then they put it onto the internet saying this character is the best ever. I mean, you have to cut through all the bullshit, and you have to be honest and say, what are my objectives with playing, what is my style, my preference, and then whether the advice you were given was sound. And honestly, I can easily foresee a situation where there are two people both following the advice on that I've given them, and one being very happy and one being completely miserable and quitting Genshin Impact as a result. It's the nature of the game. It's not about being right, it's about the process and whether you can still trust the process that someone presents to you. And I think that's perhaps the neatest way of putting it. Right, I've talked enough. My poor throat. This is hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video, some of the background footage here. You can see on my C6 account, if we can't break the Geoshield, we just brute force it, which is also kind of hilarious in its own case. But regardless, if you've got any content ideas for me as well, let me know down below in the comment section. And once again, thank you very much for watching and keeping up with the channel. Have a great day. Cheers.